Hey everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Terry Hunter. I'm an intuitive astrologer, and today is actually Thursday, May 7th. It's a little bit after 3 or about 3 o'clock in the afternoon here. And I have no idea why, but I was pulled to look at the chart of the United States on July 4th, 2026, as it would be the 250th anniversary birthday of declaring independence. Now, this was not the beginning of independence. This was the beginning of a war for independence. Now, while that was brewing 20 years prior in the 1750s, this is when everything sort of came to a head. I thought it would be worthy for those of you that have plans this summer or are planning, celebrations to have an idea of what's going on in the chart, because I do think that having a discerning eye and ear and listening to your intuition during this period of time will be super important. First thing I want to do is I want to talk about Mercury retrograding. Let's focus on Mercury. This is the transit wheel, okay? This is the eighth house of the United States, and there is the natal Mercury of the United States in Cancer. Right now, this is called a conjunction, which means that there's a fusion, there is a revisiting something of the people and how they're nurtured. Literally, Cancer rules the sign of patriotism. So there is going to be the people wanting to express, to think, to speak, to communicate, to learn, to revisit the ideals and the dynamics with which the United States is built upon. And I think this is going to be ramping up. This is not going to be like just happen on the day of the 4th of July, but this is a series of quite a few planets making themselves known on this day. The Mercury also rules children, it rules youth, it rules early education, like let's say from, nursery school through up to high school. So here we have it in the eighth house. It is conjunct, very loosely conjunct transit Jupiter, which has just entered Leo, which is the sign of the conception of children and a childlike behavior. So I think that there's the potential during this period of time for there to be some sort of revisiting of how we are caring for ourselves as individuals, about as a country, how we're caring for our people, our children, our communities, our neighborhoods. And I also want to say, because the other things that are going to be going on in the chart, um, you want to look at this sort of as putting a puzzle together. So this is the first piece. And I want to note that Mercury is also making an opposition. Mercury transit is a little tighter of the opposition to Pluto in the second house of the United States. So we will be thinking about how we have been potentially controlled, where other people's money, power, authority, leadership, the rules of yesteryear. Capricorn rules history, tradition, historic dynamics. And now that we've moved into this, rapid pace of the outer planets being in air and fire, these old rules really don't apply anymore. So there can be potentially some sort of feeling of something toxic coming up, something that like has been potentially overpowering you through your own fears, trepidations. While this is the United States, I really believe that the people are rising up. Like, imagine being at a concert back in the olden days when people used to flick their Bics, right? They'd open up, for an encore, and the whole stadium would be lit with these little flames. That's exactly what's happening right now in the stars. So there's going to be these series of epiphanies. Jupiter, while it's in Leo, is absolutely going to expand our need to want to express ourselves, our authenticity, but it's also going to be about fun and how we get to celebrate. So I don't know As I record this, there's some new virus being taunted on, or, you can scroll down Yahoo and find it. I try to stay away from this information right now because it's so voluminous that it's very deflating. So let me click off of Mercury right now because, oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back there for 1 second. While Mercury is making an opposition to Pluto, the natal Pluto in the house of skills and the voice and the opinion, your personal opinion. That's the other thing I should have mentioned. Mercury is also a messenger, dispensing information. So there could be some sort of feelings of tension or of certain structures that feel like they're starting to break down, but they're not breaking down on the outside as much as they're breaking down on the inside of the way you think. And I think this is further evidenced by the quincunx that Mercury transit as its conjunct natal Mercury in the United States, and it makes this blind spot to the moon here in Aquarius. Now, the moon in Aquarius is in the third house of thinking, the house that Mercury naturally rules. So there is a review. And I want to offer it this way because the moon in Aquarius is not necessarily emotional, it's very intellectual. So there can be this blindsided feeling, and it could be the United States as a personality, as a government, which is inadvertently, doing something they're unaware of that affects the people, that isn't actually maybe approved by the people, or the people may not be in alignment. Again, we're looking at this eighth house is other people's power and control over us. And when we're looking at the United States, we're looking at the eighth house begins with Cancer. Cancer is ruled by the moon, and the moon is here in the third house in this very intellectual place. The moon is not necessarily comfortable here because it isn't expressing emotions in a way that is, I don't know how much it can see one-on-one. It usually sees more in mass, like what's better for the group. It's like Spock. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the individual, and the needs of the individual absolutely matter. And that's what Mercury would be saying right here. So this quincunx is a blind spot. So I don't know if there's going to be potential restrictions around the United States activities during the 4th of July, like a curfew of some kind, but I just feel something weird is coming. Let's go to the next thing. Let's look at what Venus is doing on the day of the 4th of July. Now, I put this at 9 p.m. in Washington, D.C. Technically, it was Philadelphia where the government was born, but now the government resides in Washington. And 9 o'clock is around the time when most people get their fireworks start because it's summertime, the sun sets later. So this is why I put the chart at this time. So Venus now, transit Venus is up here on the actual cusp of the 9th house, which is ruled by Leo, making an opposition to the moon. So there's something about, literally enjoyment, pleasure. Libra, I'm sorry, Libra. Venus rules Libra and Taurus, but it rules partnership. Yes, we know that, but it rules luxury and fun in the way of like, let's go cook, let's have a great meal together. Let's, go to a wine tasting. Let's go shopping for new pillows and make the house feel warm and cozy. And she's at this mastering degree, and the 4 can very much represent a Uranian feeling of wanting to rebel if my freedoms are being somehow restricted. And here's this opposition to the moon. And now we're seeing this quincunx to Pluto. So Venus is not feeling very comfortable right now. And Venus is in a sextile to natal Mars. So while this is a favorable aspect, it's also an aspect that has to be activated. So when I say that, there would have to be a bravery about, again, how do I value myself as a country and as citizens of this country? I know not everyone potentially watching this lives in the United States, but if you live here, you're going to really be tasked to individualize yourself up against the country. And is it aligned to your personal values, your belief system, and how you want your life to be? We see that Venus is making a trine to the natal Chiron. Chiron is the wound that we carry. And here in the United States, it's a wound of truly protecting how I feel, and digging deep into that feeling versus just kind of taking action and moving forward too quickly. The thing about Aries is it's a knee-jerk reaction, and this is the sign of our roots here. So there could be, I don't know, again, I feel like the country could have a knee-jerk reaction to something, or the government could, that affects the people. And I don't want to go, oh, here we go to the third point, which is where I'm the most honestly concerned, is the conjunction here between transit Mars and Uranus, and it is in a conjunction with natal Uranus. I'm going to click on Mars here. Uranus rules aviation. It rules rockets. It could rule fireworks. Okay. And with Mars here, I almost, when I looked at the chart, thought, oh my God, I wonder if the United States would do this huge fireworks display, and somehow something would be, we need to be careful about that because it could be over the top, or I don't know. I don't want to try to predict any sort of disaster, but this is all, there's so much that could happen with this configuration. Mars rules, impulsiveness, aggression. Uranus rules a bit of impulsiveness and aggression. Uranus rules aviation, and again, rockets, lightning, rebellion, visions of what can be, versus what is. And this, this, we are inevitably going to experience the Uranus return to the United States, and somewhere we are going to have an opportunity to be released from wherever we've been stagnant, or wherever we've felt that we were enslaved to something. The sixth house is naturally ruled by Venus, and Venus is in Cancer for the United States right here. So I think this could be where, even potentially, because Uranus does rule the people, the liberation for the people. And I feel like this year and the years that we've experienced and the years we're walking into are really a defining time for us as souls to see ourselves as co-creators, and then to align to the creation we want to experience. And I think that the energies are going to end up supporting that as they sort of break down other things, because as I'm saying, wherever this Venus here, Venus ruling the sixth house, is how I find value in myself, by being of service as a country. But it's not always about going to war or trying to be the hero, in the situation. Because sometimes I think Uranus wants to be the hero as it liberates those that have been restricted. And this could be a day of anger as well. So, if you're planning trips and you're planning on flying, be mindful of the energies, be mindful of the people around you, be mindful of travel in general. Again, we've got travel indicated in the Mercury conjunction that rules domestic travel and roadway travel, sidewalk travel, traveling around the neighborhood in your car. Uranus is going to rule traveling, in an airplane, traveling, in a rocket. I don't know if the United States is planning any rocket launches for the 4th of July, but who knows what they might pop up. Okay, let's go to transit Pluto now, because this is to me, this is a challenging dynamic. And I would be very careful about crowds. I would be very careful about feelings, if you have unsettled feelings about where you are. Let's say you've been at the beach all day, you have all these plans. I don't know, I would err a little bit on the side of caution. That's all I'm going to say with that right now. But again, I expect something rather unforgettable to happen at this time. I just don't know if it's positive or negative, to be frank. All right, now we're going to go to Pluto. Transit Pluto is retrograde. It went retrograde yesterday for me. Again, today is May 7th. This video is focused on the 4th of July for the United States. It's 250th anniversary. Pluto, which rules transformation, it also rules the toxic waste. It rules the anus. It rules the sexual organs. It rules power and control through those things and through, almost like sometimes you don't recognize that you're being manipulated, or you don't recognize that someone has power and control over you, because what they're offering you and what they're giving you is so much what you want. Pluto knows the deep psychology that sits underneath, and I think that's why if there's a narcissist in in the house, the narcissist will have a strong Pluto dynamic and maybe even a little bit of Aquarius here. And now we see that we have Pluto in Aquarius. So it's not a death sentence. It's just one of the vibrational possibilities of how this expresses itself. Now we see Pluto making a conjunction very tightly to the United States South Node. The South Node is in the second house of my voice, of my skills, of the history that shaped me as an entity, and that this house is ruled by Saturn. Okay. And if you think about it, the United States was shaped for 20 years, which Pluto would have been going through Capricorn probably for part of that. Absolutely, but not probably, where the authority at that time, it was England, was putting sanctions and putting restrictions on the colonies and on what they were allowed to do. And when they went there, this was counterintuitive to what the plan was. So that ramp up of those 20 years brought them to this place where Pluto is, here at 27 degrees of Capricorn in the natal chart. Now the South Node is indicating that the habit here is to rebel. The habit is to, think of the needs of the many and not so much the needs of the few. Now, the bad news could potentially be that, the government or the powers that be don't realize that they're squashing their own people in order to satisfy a governmental need. The reason that Britain started to tax the colonists was because they needed money for, I don't know, something else that was going on. It might be the French War, I don't know, whatever it was. But and they thought, well, those people should pay their fair share while they were not even in the country. So I don't need to give you a history lesson, but here the South Node, the habit of the South Node, and the ruler of the South Node is Uranus in the sixth house. So this is a very strong habit of rebellion, and we as a country sort of need to rebirth how we do this. And so I'm a little concerned about this, and I'm a little concerned about the quincunx that's hitting Jupiter and Venus in the natal chart, because this is a blind side. This is where I don't see, I don't get it. And Cancer is all about, emotions, about, nurturing, about, feeding the roots of the soul, really. And here, this is in the house of partnership, and the South Node doesn't see it. The South Node here is thinking about bigger things, like literally willing to let something die so that something they perceive would be better, untried, not tested, and others will pay the price. And while this is all happening, it's triggering this configuration over here as well. There is a square. It's a loose square. It's 4 degrees from Pluto to Chiron has just moved into the fifth house for the United States. The fifth house is technically ruled by Mars. You see the 29 degrees. So, but this is all about, the fifth house is primarily Taurus. It's all about being able to live on the land, thrive on the land, build on my skills, build on my voice, on what I want. This is the house of creation, naturally ruled by Leo. So this is going to be, a transit. We'll talk about this in another video that's going to go on for years. But right now, what's being triggered is the square here, a loose one, where our habits could very well be in conflict with what we need and what we want as a country in the way of pleasure and enjoyment. And I think that's further evidenced by what's going on up over here with Mercury in this retrograde in this house of, almost feels like, here through the media, you find things that keep you from being and doing what you want to do. I don't know. Again, I'm looking at this and trying, I don't want to be scary, and everybody lives an individual life and has an individual point of attraction. So some people might attract a more challenging dynamic of all of this, these aspects, and some might actually, through this awareness, actually tap into the higher vibrations. All right, now here comes the real challenge here, because now we have Saturn transiting, making an absolute and exact opposition to Saturn in the natal chart. Saturn in the natal chart is in the 10th house of leadership. Saturn rules government and authority, and this is its natural house, the 10th house. Saturn is exalted in Libra, which means it's in its highest power other than in its rulership, making an opposition to Saturn in Aries. So this could potentially where the government is like, this isn't about you, it's about all of us. And then we're like, but wait a minute, it feels like it's about all of us not getting to do what we want. And the government gets to do what it wants, or the authority in your life, or the elder in your life. But because we're looking at the chart of the United States as a whole, I can't help but just keep focusing on this as the government doing this to the people, because this opposition from Saturn to Saturn here is making a T-square, the focal point to the United States ego. Okay, this is the light, this is the sun, this is where it shines. It's at 13 degrees. This is a very tight focal point of restriction, of limitation, of potentially claiming that this is a strategy that we're doing. It's kind of like COVID, we're all staying in the house, stay 6 feet away from each other, as if germs can't travel. You sneeze, it goes further than 6 feet. So yeah, you're just going to have to really use your intuition and your discerning ear, your I spy, inside. I don't know what the word is I'm trying to say. Just need your inner detective to be out. Okay. And let's go on to our last transit that is going to be affecting the 4th of July. Neptune is here in the 4th house of home for the United States, making a very tight square to the natal Venus and natal Jupiter. This to me, again, where there's an erosion of, my liberties as an individual, it's making a trine here. I'm sorry, not a trine, a sextile to transit Mars and transit Uranus, and it's making a sextile exact to Pluto and the South Node. So there's a feeling that, for me as an intuitive astrologer, that this 4th of July could be riddled with rebellion from the people, rebellion, for wanting, and I don't necessarily mean violent rebellion or protests. I think, again, this is like an awakening where people will be having epiphanies. They will be starting to notice things that, started off as little occasional things. And then the next thing you know, we get used to it. And as we get used to it, we're like, wait a minute, is this how it has to be? Maybe there's a different way, because it's going to feel restrictive. This 7th house, well, it's a house of partnership. It's also a house of peace. And Venus rules our money, our sense of comfort, our sense of security. Jupiter rules our money. It rules our faith. It rules our sense of expansion and possibilities and our belief system. So as Neptune in transit is squaring that in the 1st house, it's the people being tasked to really individualize themselves, but not in a way that separates, in a way that is discerning, in a way that hears truth, not manipulation, that hears something that resonates with the soul versus something that feels taxing to the soul. And I want to offer this too, because if you're going to be in large crowds, it doesn't necessarily have to be like, some sort of person does something unsavory. You want to be very careful around anything that has to do with fire, whether they be sparklers, fireworks, barbecues, motorcycle pipes that have gotten hot because you've been riding all day. You don't want to burn your leg. I mean, just be mindful all day long and for the days preceding and probably post the 4th of July. Um, Again, I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but I do think that these are things that we could contemplate and think about as we're planning our activities. I think it gives us an opportunity to get a leg up and vibrationally align to the experience that you want, rather than being vulnerable to any fear-based theories that withhold you or keep you back from what you want to do. That's really the point of this video, is that you can discern, because again, we all have an individual vibration, and even if we're in a challenging situation, it does not necessarily mean that we are challenged by it. We may rise above it. We may learn a gift that we didn't have, or we may see something in ourselves that up until now was laying dormant. And as it awakens, which is what Uranus does, it awakens us, we become brave. And that's Mars. Mars is brave when it's not hot and impulsive. So I hope this helped. I'm going to hone in on this probably a little bit more, but I did think that it was important, because I hope y'all, if you're planning trips, parties, events of any kind, just keep in mind, keep in mind where you are and the people around you and the vibration you feel, if you get the ickies, lickety splitty. All right, guys, thanks so much. Take care. Bye bye.